KGAB Radio Friday edition. Phone number to get involved, 632-6500. From Wyoming Liberty Group is...
Good morning, Glen. Jonathan Downing with Wyoming Liberty Group. It's a balmy day out there today and light wind.
Light wind. Okay, well, that's because there's these fans to the west of us. And if they were just to turn those things off, we'd probably be doing just great. Okay, so you've been watching the Wyoming legislative session this entire time.
Oh, completely. It's been a pretty tough session on some of our legislators.
It has been, yeah.
They're struggling with the budget deficit. They're struggling with prioritizing if we should make cuts or raise taxes. And from our perspective, we need to do cuts. And when you've got $16 billion in a bunch of coffee cans of savings, we need to draw those coffee cans down before we even remotely start to talk about raising taxes. But I mean, that's been the discussion, and we think that we need to have a deep look at where we prioritize. We have thrown a lot of money over the years, trillions of dollars, at education, and in the meantime, our results are still challenging. And in that respect, those are tough decisions for these folks. But at the same time, it's if we can have dollars spent in the classroom versus on administration or bureaucracy, or as President Trump said, with respect to the federal government last week, the administrative overreach. We really need to take a serious look at trying to live within our means and prioritize wants versus needs.
All right, let's stop for a moment. This is the question I was asking you just before we got on the air here. And I've been asking it all week, and people have looked at me and shrugged their shoulders, but no one's actually given me out loud, especially people in the House and Senate, the answer that I'm really looking for, or any answer at all. So if you have to reach into the rainy day fund to balance the budget, did you balance the budget?
No.
Okay.
Sorry. And I mean that out of all due respect to everybody. But I mean, you're mainly taking out of your savings account, and if you look at it in the long term, as far as future generations, if you have to sit there and do some of these things, does that really fix the problem? And our population has not grown that much in recent years. I mean, we're larger than we were 10, 15 years ago. But the sigh and the shrug, if you will, it's mainly one of those of going, our government has grown a lot in that time period, and we've done some great things as a state. I mean, we've done amazing things at the University of Wyoming. We've done amazing things with K-12, but we're at a stage right now where state government as well as education needs to tighten its belt, and that's the part that I think is being lost in parts of these conversations. Okay, so the big discussion that's happening today over at the Capitol 2.0 is education. I was hoping they would solve this yesterday, but between the House and the Senate, they can't seem to come to an agreement. And they say, well, there's no more cuts. We can't possibly make any more cuts. Give me that budget, or give you the budget. What would you do to fix the education budget? You know, one of the things that we've been trying to urge folks to do in these times is mainly, and trying to provide solutions, not just sit there and throw bombs from the outside or anything like that, but there are companies out there right now that have approached the state and have said, hey, we specialize in efficiency studies, and we specialize in being able to take state government and get them to lean up. And I used to work for state government about 15, 20 years ago. There are others among my friends that also did. And most folks were going, oh, yeah, we're fine. We're being as efficient and as lean as we can be. But you need a fresh set of eyes on it. And one of the bills that is supposed to be in conference committee today, and the clock's ticking, if you will. Yeah, it is, yeah. But it mainly goes to the fact that get a fresh set of eyes in there and see what you can do as far as being lean. And there are a few companies out there, but one in particular had helped the state of Louisiana, state of Kansas, Detroit City, of all places, go in and with a fresh set of eyes, embed themselves in state agencies and go, here's where you can find efficiencies, and looking at it from top to bottom. And so I think that that's one of those areas that we as a state ought to take a hard look at. And we definitely need to try and figure out, before we have to sit there and have the conversation on raising taxes, we ought to be looking at trying to be getting more efficient.
This is a meeting with Wyoming Liberty Group on what to cut. By the way, I came across, and I hadn't thought about this till just now. As a joke, I read a story out of the UK, which said that some people get really upset. Doctors are afraid to tell their patients in the UK, you're overweight and you need to go on a diet, because of the reaction. People get very offended and very angry when you do that. And it reminds me of, I hate to say it, some teachers out there that get exactly that upset. Hang on, we got a call on the line. This is Glenn, who's on the phone.
Good morning, Glenn. Ron Williams here.
Yes, sir. What you got for us?
I just wanted to say thank you to the Wyoming Liberty Group for all the hard work they've done in this legislative session. Thank God we've got them here. And quick comment that if any of your listeners out there don't know anything about or don't know much about the Wyoming Liberty Group, get to know them. They are the best friend the Constitution and the taxpaying citizen has in the state of Wyoming.
And this was not a paid political announcement.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, I greatly appreciate that, and your kind comments. And in the meantime, I mean, it's one of those from where we sit. We were one of the few organizations that was speaking up against increasing spending for education this year. And it's not that education's not important, but when you look at the proper role of government and you look at what we are spending right now as a state across the board, the questions need to be asked as far as performance. And let's try and do the most effective job we can, but also let's do it by being efficient in how we spend our dollars.
More with Wyoming Liberty Group on KGAB Mornings in just a moment. 9:20 is the time. From Wyoming Liberty Group is
Jonathan Downing.
Jonathan with us, just complaining about how exhausted he is after the legislative session. Here's what I worry about. Because they have been not been able to come together in the House and Senate on education, my worry is they've said, well, you might have to have a special session. That means they would come back, and you're right back where you started from all over again with those long hours.
Definitely, and
it's good for me. It's show prep. I like it.
You can sell commercials.
Job security. Yeah,
yes.
So come on back, as far as I'm concerned. But all right, now let's get serious a moment since we're talking about education. I keep hearing from people, and I agree when I look into it as well. The main problem here in the state of Wyoming, it seems to be in education, is that we are top heavy. So you're nodding. You agree. What do you know specifically what you would cut?
Completely. And I mean, there's at least one school district in the state of Wyoming where we're spending $34,000 per pupil,
which is more than most states. Even states that have turn out better students than we do, they spend less.
And performance. And the state of Utah, I want to say, is around $6,000 to $8,000. If you look at our scoring as well as what we're spending, it baffles the mind to see, and you need to have results there. But the long-term challenges for us, I think, are mainly to prioritize and see if we can get more efficient in how we deliver education. And when I was in school, and don't want to date myself or anything, but I mean, we were in modulars. You don't necessarily need these Taj Mahals, but I mean that's what it's come to as far as some of these court cases. And so let's try and get a look at our results, see if we can possibly get some competition within education, because if you're spending $34,000, I mean, you could not that I'd recommend this, but
right.
you could ship off little Johnny to a boarding school for less than that.
Okay. Well, now, what about just on the administrative? Because you're talking about buildings. We've been doing a lot of building here in Wyoming. But what about just on the administrative side?
Administration-wise, I mean, if you look at some school districts within Wyoming, and I don't want to be coming across as overly critical, but you've got a principal assigned for every grade in some school districts. You have
Wait. A principal for every grade, not a principal for the whole school?
in the high schools.
In high school, yeah.
And then you also have an assistant principal, and then you also have the administrative staff that's associated with that.
Because my high school, which had a lot, in Florida, had a lot, we were packed. We had thousands in my high school, thousands of students. 5,000, one high school, one principal.
Definitely. And the thing that I don't think people are understanding, and this is one of those of you recently coming from Campbell County, but I used to work for the energy industry. And at the time, the energy industry, which pays 70% of the taxes in the state of Wyoming, roughly, they had a decline of over 30%. And I had a lot of very good friends either get laid off, early retired, reduction in force. And we have not seen a similar cutting of the belt within the government sector.
I think you just made a really good point there, because here again, a 30% reduction meant that the company reduced, or in money coming in, meant the company reduced itself by about that percentage. But when you have that kind of reduction in tax money coming into the state of Wyoming, the state doesn't cut itself by the same amount. For some reason, the government can't seem to find the same kinds of cuts in there.
They haven't, and while the private sector has been hurting, and I grew up in Laramie County, and have been here a long time, but there are a number of folks around this state that have never been north of Chugwater, west of Laramie. But if you get out and you look at what was going on in Casper as well as Campbell County and other parts of the state, the private sector was hurting really hard, and still is. And in the meantime, some folks out there think, oh, well, we can just sit there and keep on trying to milk the golden goose. But it's like the money's not there for that part of the sector.
Okay, not to be too critical, I think you're mixing your metaphors. I don't know how you milk a goose, but okay. Just more
I'm sorry. Yeah,
more of Wyoming
well
Liberty
said.
Group in
Well
just a
said.
moment. Yeah.
Whether you
Time. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. Phone number, if you want to talk with Wyoming Liberty Group, it's a good time to do it right now. 632-6500. That's 632-6500. We got just a few minutes left here, so I want to make sure we hit up, because I've been pounding on education. That's one of the big topics here in the state. But what else does the state of Wyoming need to do to get its fiscal house in order? What are we missing?
Well, I think we need an across-the-board review of where we're spending our money as far as state government. And I didn't want to pound too hard on education or anything, because it's very important that we ensure that our future generations are well educated. In the meantime, we need to look at different parts of state government, because we know there's fat in some of those areas, and we know we can get better and get leaner, and that's the main part that I think that,
according to what I'm hearing from inside inside the Beltway, let's call it that, there's nothing else to cut. It's not possible to cut anymore.
I beg to differ.
Okay, this is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
This is Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. What you got?
I'm sure the Wyoming Liberty Group is familiar with the Ferrari report that was done in the late 80s on how Wyoming could streamline its government.
Are you familiar with that report?
She was cutting out a little bit as far as...
She was. Are you familiar with the report that was done that talks about how Wyoming can streamline its budget?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you had the Ferrari report as well as the Tax 2000
that's what
report.
I was talking about. And then I started teaching right when the Department of Ed was coming in. And when I first started teaching, I mean, I had to create a lot of my own teaching materials. I hardly had textbooks. And I saw the changes change. And now they're basically teaching two subjects, math and language arts, and they're not doing well at either of those.
Well, and let me bring up something based on what you were just saying. So did you catch all of that?
Yes.
Okay, now, my thought was, okay, here I was in North Carolina. And North Carolina got a big infusion of federal dollars and decided, well, we're going to go ahead and spend these dollars to improve North Carolina schools. Boy, the technology. Smart boards instead of chalkboard. Wow, the technology, the new schools, new buildings. But when they were all done spending all of that money, and I forget how many billions it was, the scores did not improve. The students were not better quality. So did they need all of that technology, or did they need to come and find a different way of teaching to improve the student performance.
And I think that's what's key as far as performance, because you have different levels of learning and how people will learn. And in the meantime, I actually was on the Goals 2000 task force back then, and one of the key areas as far as when you're trying to figure out how to deal with specific student learners, it's critical. And in the meantime, not everybody's built for a 4-year college.
Right.
I think what's critical if you ever see anything as far as Mike Rowe, he did Dirtiest Jobs and some of those things. He is a big proponent of career and technical education. And in addition to that, I think if you had school choice and you had other opportunities as far as competition with education, whether it's a private school where you can do scholarships or other things, that you might see better performance.
All right. So you are writing extensively about it, as are other people at Wyoming Liberty Group. So people can find you where?
wyliberty.org. Again, wyliberty.org.
Now, especially, we'll have you in on a regular basis, of course, but especially back in, if the legislative body decides they needed to turn around and come back for a special session. There's rumblings, there's rumors, you know.
I'm hearing it'll probably be before next year, but not immediately after this session.
Okay. Hey, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate it.
9:30 is the time. We're